What kind of person looks a room full of neighbors in the eye and declares that disabled people don't belong among them? Karen Mitchell did, and the moment those words left her mouth, the air in the Willow Creek Community Center turned to ice. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the small town gathered to discuss mundane things like park renovations or school budgets. But tonight, the agenda had shifted. Karen, all 5'4" and 300 pounds of her, stood at the podium, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Her round face, flushed with indignation, twisted into a sneer as she leaned into the microphone. "Disabled people belong in facilities," she said, her words landing like a grenade in the quiet room. "They're a burden on society, leeching resources from hard-working taxpayers like me." The crowd gasped, a collective inhale that sucked the warmth from the space. Karen didn't flinch. She doubled down, her voice rising. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. They can't contribute. They're better off out of sight." In the front row, Emily Carter gripped the armrests of her wheelchair so tightly her knuckles whitened. At 26, she'd fought harder than most to live independently in Willow Creek. Born with cerebral palsy, she'd spent her life proving people wrong, people like Karen, who saw her as less than human. Emily's heart pounded, but she kept her chin high, her dark eyes blazing. Next to her, her friend Sam, a lanky mechanic with a perpetual oil stain on his jeans, muttered under his breath, "She's done it now." The room buzzed with murmurs, a storm brewing. Karen, oblivious, kept talking, her voice dripping with self-righteous certainty. She ranted about normal people's rights, about how her taxes shouldn't fund ramps or special programs. Each word was a jab, and Emily felt every one. The forum moderator, a nervous retiree named Linda, tried to steer the conversation back to the agenda. "Let's keep this civil," she stammered, but Karen wasn't having it. She waved a dismissive hand, her gold bracelets jangling. "Civil? I'm being honest. This town's going broke coddling people who can't pull their weight." That's when Emily raised her hand. The room fell silent. Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a smirk as if she'd already won. Emily's voice, steady despite the tremor in her hands, cut through the tension. "Karen, have you ever considered that disabled people contribute more than you realize? Or are you too busy judging to notice?" The crowd murmured approval, a few clapping softly. Karen's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. She leaned forward, her voice venomous. "Contribute? Sweetheart, you're in a wheelchair. What exactly do you do besides take up space?" The words hit like a slap, but Emily didn't back down. She'd dealt with people like Karen before, people who saw her disability as her entire identity. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every person in Willow Creek who'd ever been dismissed, dehumanized, or shoved aside. Sam leaned over, whispering, "You've got this." Emily nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the truth. Karen's outburst wasn't new. For months, she'd been stirring trouble, complaining about accessibility ramps clogging sidewalks, whining about special treatment at the grocery store. But tonight, she'd crossed a line, and Emily wasn't about to let it slide. As Emily prepared to respond, something unexpected happened. A soft voice piped up from the back of the room. It was Mrs. Delaney, an 80-year-old widow who rarely spoke at forums. Her hands trembled as she stood, clutching her cane. "Karen, my grandson has autism. He's the kindest soul I know. Are you saying he belongs locked away?" The room turned to her, the weight of her words sinking in. Karen's face reddened, but she didn't answer. Mrs. Delaney's voice grew stronger. "You don't get to decide who belongs. You don't get to play God." The crowd erupted in applause, and Karen's confidence cracked. Emily seized the moment, her voice ringing clear. "Karen, you're not speaking for this town. You're speaking for your own prejudice. And we're not going to let you get away with it." The forum was spiraling, and Karen's grip on the narrative was slipping. She tried to regain control, her voice shrill. "I'm entitled to my opinion," she snapped, but the crowd wasn't having it. Sam stood up, his usually laid-back demeanor gone. Your opinion's trash, Karen. You're not just rangieri cruel. Others joined in, their voices overlapping in a chorus of outrage. Linda, the moderator, looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Emily, though, stayed calm, her eyes locked on Karen. This wasn't just a shouting match. It was a reckoning. Karen had underestimated Willow Creek, thinking her loud voice and smug attitude would carry the day. She was wrong. The truth was, Karen's outburst wasn't just a random tirade. It was the culmination of months of resentment. She'd moved to Willow Creek 2 years ago, a loud transplant from the city who'd bought the biggest house on Maple Street and acted like she owned the town. She'd clashed with neighbors over everything: parking spots, noise complaints, even the community garden's layout. But her real vendetta was against the town's efforts to improve accessibility. Willow Creek had recently passed a budget to install more ramps and update public spaces, funded partly by a state grant. Karen, who'd loudly opposed the plan, saw it as a personal affront. "My taxes!" she'd shriek at anyone who'd listen. What she didn't know, what no one had told her yet, was that the grant wasn't even taxpayer money. It was a federal fund for rural communities, and Emily had been the one to secure it. That was the twist no one saw coming. Emily wasn't just a bystander in this fight. She was a community organizer, a quiet force who'd spent years advocating for accessibility. She'd written the grant proposal herself, spending sleepless nights perfecting it. The ramps Karen hated so much, they existed because of Emily. The irony was almost poetic, and as the forum descended into chaos, Emily decided it was time to drop the bombshell. She raised her voice, cutting through the noise. "Karen, you keep talking about your taxes. Did you know the accessibility upgrades you hate were funded by a federal grant? One I wrote." The room went silent again, all eyes on Karen. Her mouth opened, then closed like a fish out of water. For the first time, she had no comeback. The revelation hung in the air, a blade poised to strike. Karen's face, already flushed, turned a deeper shade of crimson. Her hands gripped the podium, her gold bracelets clinking as she struggled to respond. Emily's words had stripped her bare, exposing not just her ignorance but her malice. The crowd, still reeling from Mrs. Delaney's emotional plea, now stared at Karen with a mix of disbelief and disgust. Sam let out a low whistle, leaning back in his chair. "Well, damn," he muttered, loud enough for the front row to hear. A few people chuckled, but the laughter was sharp, cutting. Karen wasn't just losing the argument, she was losing the room. She tried to recover, her voice wavering. "That's not the point," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Emily. "You're twisting my words. I'm talking about fairness, about what's practical." But the crowd wasn't buying it. A man in the back, Tom, a burly farmer who'd known Emily since she was a kid, stood up. "Fairness? You're out here saying my niece, who's got Down syndrome, don't belong in our town. You call that fair?" His voice boomed, and Karen flinched. The room erupted again, voices overlapping in a wave of indignation. Linda, the moderator, banged her gavel, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a teaspoon. Emily, though, stayed focused. She knew this wasn't about shouting Karen down. It was about dismantling her argument piece by piece. "Karen," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you say disabled people are a burden, but I'm not the one wasting this town's time with hate. I'm not the one who's been reported to the county for violating accessibility laws." The crowd gasped again, and Karen's eyes widened. That was the second bombshell. Emily had done her homework. Karen's new house, the one she bragged about endlessly, had an illegal fence blocking a public sidewalk, a sidewalk that needed to be accessible. Emily had filed a complaint with the county weeks ago, and the investigation was already underway. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She hadn't known about the complaint. No one had. Emily had kept it quiet, not wanting to escalate things until she had to. But tonight, with Karen's cruelty laid bare, it was time to play her cards. "You've been breaking the law, Karen," Emily continued. "You built that fence without a permit, and it's blocking access for people like me. The county's already looking into it. You're facing fines, maybe even a lawsuit. The room buzzed with whispers. Karen's neighbors, the same ones she'd alienated with her complaints and demands, now looked at her with new eyes. She wasn't just cruel, she was a hypocrite. The confrontation was electric, every word charged with consequence. Karen tried to pivot, her voice shrill. This is a witch hunt. You're all ganging up on me. But the crowd was done with her excuses. Mrs. Delaney, still standing, pointed her cane at Karen. You brought this on yourself, young lady. You don't get to tear down our community and cry victim. The applause was deafening, a roar of support for Emily, for Mrs. Delaney, for everyone Karen had tried to diminish. Sam grinned, giving Emily a subtle thumbs up. Even Linda, who'd been shrinking behind the podium, seemed to find her spine. Karen, I think it's time you sit down, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. But Karen wasn't done. She leaned into the microphone, her voice dripping with venom. You think you're so righteous, Emily? You think you're better than me? You're nothing but a charity case. The words were a desperate swing, but they landed poorly. The crowd booed, a low, angry rumble. Emily didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Instead, she smiled a small, defiant smile that said she'd already won. Karen, the only charity case here is your sense of decency, she said. The room exploded in cheers, and Karen's face crumpled. For the first time, she looked small, her bravado gone. The forum was no longer a discussion, it was a battlefield. And Karen was losing badly. The crowd's anger wasn't just about her words. It was about what they represented. Willow Creek was a tight-knit town, the kind where people showed up with casseroles when someone was sick, where kids played in the streets without fear. Karen's rhetoric threatened that. She wasn't just attacking Emily or disabled people, she was attacking the town's soul. And they weren't going to let her get away with it. As the night wore on, the confrontation took a legal turn. Tom, the farmer, pulled out his phone and started reading from the county's accessibility guidelines. Says right here, he called out, any obstruction to a public sidewalk is a violation of state law. Karen, you're in deep trouble. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Karen's face went pale. She hadn't expected this. She'd thought she could bully her way through, that her money and her loud voice would protect her. But Willow Creek wasn't her playground. It was a community, and it was fighting back. Karen's empire of arrogance crumbled in real time. The community forum, once a place for mundane debates, had become her undoing. She stood at the podium, her hands shaking, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. The crowd's anger was a living thing, pulsing through the room. Emily, still seated in her wheelchair, remained the eye of the storm, calm, resolute, unbreakable. Karen's words had tried to diminish her, but they'd only made her stronger. The truth was out, and it was brutal. Karen wasn't just wrong. She was liable. The illegal fence, the county investigation, the federal grant Emily had secured, it all painted a picture of a woman who'd misjudged her power and her place. Karen tried one last defense, her voice cracking. This is my property, my rights. But no one was listening. Tom, still holding his phone, read out the county's penalty for accessibility violations. Up to $5,000 in fines and mandatory removal of the obstruction. Karen's neighbors, once silent, now spoke up. A woman in the third row, a single mom named Rachel, stood. You've been nothing but trouble since you moved here, Karen. You don't get to break the law and then lecture us about fairness. The crowd roared again, and Karen's shoulders slumped. She was out of moves. The sledgehammer came when Linda, the moderator, finally took charge. Karen, you've disrupted this meeting enough, she said, her voice steady now. You're welcome to stay, but you need to stop talking. It was a polite way of saying she'd been defeated. Karen sank into her chair, her face a mask of humiliation. The room's energy shifted, the anger giving way to something else, resolve. Emily took the microphone, her voice soft but powerful. This isn't about Karen, she said. It's about us, about what kind of community we want to be. I choose one where everyone belongs, where everyone has a voice. The applause was thunderous, a wave of unity that drowned out Karen's last shred of dignity. In the days that followed, Karen's world unraveled further. The county issued a formal notice about her fence, giving her 30 days to remove it or face legal action. Word spread fast in Willow Creek, and Karen became a pariah. Neighbors stopped waving, stores forgot her orders, and her social media rants were met with silence. But the real punishment wasn't just social, it was legal. Emily's complaint triggered a deeper investigation, and it turned out Karen's house renovations had violated multiple codes, not just the sidewalk issue. The fines piled up, and whispers of a class action lawsuit began to circulate among other residents affected by her actions. Karen's downfall was a quiet victory for Willow Creek. The town rallied around Emily, not as a charity case but as a leader. The accessibility upgrades continued, faster now, with more volunteers than ever. Mrs. Delaney's grandson, a shy teenager named Ben, started attending community events, his smile lighting up the room. Sam organized a fundraiser to cover legal costs for the county complaints, and even Linda, the timid moderator, found herself speaking up more. The forum had changed them all, a reminder that cruelty could be met with courage, that one voice could spark a movement. Karen, meanwhile, retreated. Her big house on Maple Street went quiet, the blinds always drawn. Some said she was planning to move, unable to face the town she tried to dominate. Others hoped she'd stay, if only to learn. Emily didn't care either way. She'd won, not by tearing Karen down but by lifting everyone else up. She kept working, organizing, advocating, her wheelchair a symbol not of limitation but of resilience. The community forum had been a crucible, forging something stronger than Haiti-a-town that refused to be divided. The story didn't end with applause or headlines. It ended with small, human moments. Ben high-fiving Sam at the park, Rachel helping Mrs. Delaney with her groceries, Emily rolling down a newly built ramp, her laughter echoing. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And in the end, that was enough. Emily's final thought, as she looked out at the town she'd fought for, was simple. Belonging isn't given, it's built. And no one, not even Karen, could take that away.